Al Hounsell, how are you today?
Really good, Ted. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. You are a fellow Innovator of the Year, Emeritus, I guess now.
Emeritus, yes, for sure.
Well, for the folks that don't know you out there, why don't you just give a quick rundown, who you are, what you do, and where you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Al Hounsell, I'm the National Director of AI Innovation and Knowledge at Gowling WLG. We're a global firm, and I'm based in our Toronto office. And I basically lead the library, knowledge management, innovation teams, and our solutions team to help solve workflow problems, to deliver reusable knowledge products, and obviously the legal technology component as well.
So, of all of that really interesting sounding work, like what's like one of the biggest challenges that you're up against right now?
Yeah, I think for me, and this is true of my whole career, but the biggest challenge is really helping to build bridges into what I see as being the future for the practice. And so sometimes it's easy for me to kind of live in that future and think about, okay, what does law look like in 5 years? And you know, the technology right now, it's not perfect. It makes mistakes, it's not well integrated into a lot of things. But as a technical person, I can see the building blocks are there. And I know like this is just a matter of time before all of this is pieced together and things are so much better. And then you've got to come back to reality because you're dealing with the technology as it exists now, and you're dealing with the practice as it exists now, some of whom are super keen and are on the cutting edge of AI and other innovations, some of whom require a little more hand-holding and need use cases to be spoon-fed and really helped along in that process. And so living in that tension and that balance, that's the biggest challenge and also the biggest opportunity.
Yeah, so I have a friend who's a senior partner at a big law firm, over 1,000 attorneys. He happens to live in St. Louis, and he's a client. We go to breakfast once a quarter and chit-chat. He's head of the Innovation Council, so very innovative thinker, and he has kind of told me that I'm over-indexing on the future now. And you know, that is a balance like you just talked about. Mm-hmm. Like, you're right. I can't help but look 3-4 years out, and I think 3-4 years is massive change between here and there. But the reality is we still are where we are, not just in the practice of law, but in the business of law too. Mm-hmm. So I constantly have to reel myself in. I want to be forward looking and like get there and talk about it, but the reality is we still have to deal with the constraints that we're living with today.
You have to be comfortable in that tension because on one side, the legal industry has been way too tactical. Yes. They've just, we've had an incremental innovation and they think about what are we doing now, how do we bring that in, and there's that slow change, which makes sense. If you're bringing in an incremental innovation, you bring it in an incremental way. But with generative AI, we're now looking at a disruptive innovation. And we're using those same innovation models, trying to bring in a disruptive innovation in an incremental way, when really we need to be looking at some more fundamental aspects of the entire business of law. So there's the pitfalls on that side, being too tactical. But then as you mentioned as well, over-indexing on the future, if we're too far that way, I call it sort of like a Noah's Ark situation where you're building out this thing, hoping for something to come in the future, but you can't do that in the legal industry. Because if you're building too long into something that's in the future, you're going to be fired before you're able to build that ark or whatever it is, right? And so you've got to build those bridges. You have to find value now with the new technology, but then bring it into your workflows in a way that builds out capacities within the organization so the organization is ready for the future that is fast approaching. So it's exciting, but it is not easy.
Yeah, and you know what, I have a tendency to run to the future faster than maybe people around me are ready to run.
Yeah.
I did it in legal, so we started in 2008 as a company called AcroWire, and we got engaged with ILTA probably 15 years ago now, started doing road shows maybe 2013, and started talking about the cloud. And I was like, this makes perfect sense. Other industries are moving there. I was 10 years too early. Big law was not ready to have the cloud conversation.
Yeah.
And the reality is, there are still big AM law firms today that are just really starting the planning around moving to the cloud. So getting too far ahead of the pack doesn't serve you well. I got to reel myself back in.
Yeah.
I imagine you have to do the same thing.
Yeah, the same thing, because I'm dealing with lawyers every single day, and they're wonderful, creative, innovative people, but they are rooted in the present reality of what value are we right now delivering to our clients, and that's perfectly reasonable and perfectly fine. And so we've got to take these things that I can see that this is what the technology is going to be in the future, and I can see how this is going to disrupt our business model, but I can't build around that just yet. I've got to bring in the current capabilities in the current workflows and just help people incrementally.
Yeah, and it's so much more than a tech conversation. Culture is a huge component, and historically, I know people don't like to hear this, but the reality is law firms have underinvested in technology relative to their peers. So to put that in perspective, law firms, big law firms have historically invested 1 to 3% of revenue in tech. Financial services, low to mid-teens. Right? So massively different, 10x higher investment in many other industries. And now law firms are in a place where there hasn't been real attention to detail around data hygiene. We're way behind on our cloud migration. We're understaffed, really, with the types of resources that we need to get it to the next level. And now we have a fire underneath us because the world is changing so quickly. And but that cultural piece is huge.
It is. And I think, just to reframe that a little bit, when we think about what are the actual capabilities of the technology, it helps provide a lens to that whole story, right? Like, you look at the financial industry, computers for quite a long time have been better at math than people were. Right? So it makes sense that accounting and financial services were disrupted first.
Sure.
You sort of follow that along and look at the consulting industry and big data in the 2010s and following, super relevant to making strategic decisions for your organization. And we saw consulting disrupted after through this big data wave. Now we're in the age of LLMs, and machines can now parse language and extract from language and reformulate language in ways that is getting better and better. It's not at the level of what a senior lawyer can do yet, but this disruption we've seen in other industries is just now it's cutting to the core of what we do as wordsmiths. And so the legal industry, in some ways, has to grapple with something it hasn't grappled with before, but in other ways can kind of see a blueprint from these other industries in terms of how we want to navigate this.
Yeah, and there is a ton of pent-up demand on the buy side for innovation. I did a little, I guess you could call it a study, a survey, whatever. I looked at the ILTA 2014 roster, and there were 16 people who had the word innovation in their title. Today, there's over 400. So when I did this, it was in late 2024, so it had been exactly 10 years. And in that decade, there was an 1,800% increase in innovation titles. Now, so you might sit back and go, okay, does that mean that we've been more innovative, or we had 18?
That is exactly what I'm asking. Is there a correlation between actual innovation and titles?
Yes, and I would say the answer has historically been no, and there's some data points that support that. The Blickstein Group does a LDO, Law Department Operations Survey every year, and last December they asked GCs, a bunch of them, 80, is your law firm innovative? Almost 2/3, 63%, either disagreed or strongly disagreed. So you have 1,800% growth in innovation investment, and 2/3 of your customers don't think you're innovative. Where's the disconnect? There's a disconnect somewhere. I don't know. What are your thoughts on where that exists?
Yeah, I think it really is this incremental innovation trap. It is innovation to incrementally improve workflows. That is a type of innovation, but oftentimes when we throw around the word, we're thinking about what most scholars call disruptive or breakthrough innovation, right? When we're thinking about the Teslas and the Apples and these other big organizations in the world that have completely redefined categories. And so then we take the same word and bring it into the law firm context and, oh, we've shaved 5 minutes off of this workflow, this is our innovation, and it seems like this word has no meaning in the legal context. I think having a framework for the way in which you want to approach innovation from a portfolio perspective, where law firms understand, yeah, a good portion of what we do should actually focus on incremental innovation, because not only is it something that is a bit lower risk from the change management and adoption side, it's lower risk in terms of ROI. It's much more likely to produce a positive return on investment. The breakthrough stuff, you'll fail miserably at some of it, and then some of it you'll hit out of the park, and law firms need to do what other organizations have done for many years as they think about an innovation portfolio, and put some chips in some of the breakthrough ideas that'll redefine things in a measured and thoughtful way, in addition to the incremental innovations.
So, all right, the chips analogy, I've got a thought on that. Yeah. So historically, law firms don't do R&D, right? They're a cash basis accounting partnership, and that model optimizes profit at the end of the year, and there's very little, like 1% in legal goes to R&D. So we're going to have more. I don't think that you're going to get by. You know, we're a software vendor. I'd love to say, oh, just buy off-the-shelf products and you know, work your way to Big Law 2.0. I don't think that's reality, because how are firms going to differentiate themselves? If I can buy the same tool you can, that's non-differentiating by definition. So where I think firms do have an opportunity to differentiate themselves is all of their data, all of their work product, all their successful deals, all of that internal institutional knowledge. And to tap into that, you can't just buy something off the shelf. You're probably going to have to make some investments internally. So how does your firm, or how do you think about like that R&D piece that's historically not really been a focus?
Yeah, so I have a couple thoughts on this. The first is from a build versus buy perspective. I come from a technical background, built and sold a couple of small companies, developer since high school, and I love building stuff. And I've tried building stuff in the law firm context as well, and in some cases it works really well. It really comes down to that business model though, in terms of how much do we want to invest, not just from a financial standpoint, but how much do we want to invest in terms of the time that it takes to investigate and research and develop these kinds of things, many of which don't work out. There just hasn't been that change management that's happened at the management level in law firms to develop the appetite for things that don't pan out. And that is a crucial element of research and development. So that's one aspect. I agree with you that it needs to happen more. I wonder whether it will happen more on a partnership basis with other organizations. And I say that because we sometimes talk about the legal industry, but are referring specifically to law firms when we're using that term. The legal industry is so much more broad. So R&D is happening on an industry level when you look at the legal tech companies and the ALSPs that are structured differently from an investment standpoint. And I think forging some of those partnerships where a firm can leverage what is unique to them while leveraging the strength of the external organization, I think that's where the most success lies. And you know, historically, it seems like that's where the most successful projects have been found.
We're talking about a project right now.
We are.
With you. You guys are an existing intranet customer, and honestly, not no, all jokes aside, you have one of the most beautiful intranets that we've seen. I've been doing this for 17 years. You did an amazing job with the UX around that, so we're proud to be a part of that project, and we got another interesting project that we're talking about as well. And when I say R&D, what I'm not suggesting is that we go try and rebuild the capabilities of Harvey. But what I think we're going to have to do is get away from this mindset of bring your data to AI, and have to start thinking more about how you bring AI to your data.
Yeah.
Right? So, Azure AI Search, Azure OpenAI, you've got all of your client work product in the DMS that's institutional knowledge that you can then harvest. With the current set of off-the-shelf tools, they can't tap into, it's really hard to do wholesale AI operations, right? It's kind of more, it's ad hoc, it's kind of in workflow type stuff. So yeah, I don't know, how do you think about that, bringing AI to your data? Do you see that as a future path?
I think that there's a hybrid approach that we're starting to see from the vendors, where you're bringing technology to your data, but you're customizing the workflows through which it flows as part of that integration. And so the easier the vendors make it for us to bring those customizations so that the AI actually understands our tagging methodology and where we're storing what kinds of data and what types of documents are relevant to what types of workflows, I think partially that's going to help a lot. But this is one of those future and now problems as well.
Yeah.
Because the future state, these AI tools will scour everything you have, and there's not a lot of manual work that's going to be required in order for it to develop incredible insights from our data. The building blocks exist now for that to happen, and we're starting to see some integrations from different vendors. And it's really about, as you're thinking about the investment from the law firm perspective, there are things that we could do now that would bring competitive advantage in the short term, but by the time we do it, are we already in that future world where all of that investment is basically not necessary? We've seen this in other industries. When GPT first came out, you look at, I'm not going to name the companies, but certain financial companies that invested in custom models that was going to bring differentiation for them, millions and millions of dollars. GPT-4 comes out, and it blows out of the water what these organizations were able to create on their own, right? So that's the question from the law firm perspective, especially when you're helping guide an organization led by risk-averse lawyers, where success has to be an element of this story. You don't want to invest too heavily in something that the future state of technology is going to solve for you.
Yeah, and two, when I say bring AI to your data, I don't mean retraining, redoing the work of ChatGPT. Yeah. Maybe it's reinforcement learning with data. Speaking of which, law firm data is all over the place. There hasn't been a huge focus, industry-wide, and I mean in the law firm world, on data hygiene, right? And now we're in a place where data hygiene really matters.
Yeah.
And you'll look into a DMS and see, stock purchase agreement final, then the final, then the final, and it's really hard. Sometimes the attorneys themselves who work those matters can't piece together, and I know this because this just happened to us. We had a document sent out that it was a buyout, and there was the personal wire information in the last page of the document. Yeah. And again, it was just a naming convention, and nobody's privacy was breached as a result, but they quickly fixed it. But it was man, it's really hard to know, hey, where's the final? Yeah. So how much is data hygiene, how much cleanup do you think we're going to have to do before we can really take it to the next level?
I feel like my answer is the same to all these questions, because it really is about that tension.
Yeah.
If we think about the messed up document management systems and the lack of hygiene there now, if a person can sit down and look at, this is the document that is the final document, by looking at the context of the other documents there, I feel like we're coming to a future state where an AI system can do that as well. And so now we've got this tension. In 3 years, will I have an AI system that can scour through my document management system and do that exact cleanup and tagging that will take a heavy amount of investment from a people perspective to do right now? And that is the balance, and that's the tension that we have to think about when we're investing into anything, when you're in such a rapidly changing technological landscape.
It's good stuff. All right, we're almost out of time, but just one last question for you. Are there any projects or kind of initiatives that you've been working on that you feel could inspire others, or that there were some key learnings and takeaways that you'd be willing to share?
Sure. So from the months of April through to July at my firm, we were basically in the heat of AI mania. We tried everything. We had different structured pilots, different categories of tools. Over 300 people were part of these pilots. We asked for a lot of their time to test use cases in multiple tools and catalog exactly how much time was saved, how much quality was improved, did it reduce risk in any way, did it drive any other client-facing factors. So we had a very high ask of our practitioners. And Ted, I have not seen anything like this. Like the level of excitement and participation we've had, which partially is just out of luck. Like the tools are just a lot better now than they were 6 months ago. But partially is just the enthusiasm of the practice of the firm that I've joined. I joined Gowling in November, and it's been really inspiring to me to see just that innovative mindset, that desire to get involved. We collected so much structured data on all these different tools, but more importantly, use cases. How can we drive more value to clients? And I think being data-driven around these decisions is really important. Like, I can't tell you how many things were so much easier when you've got all this data, when you're making purchasing decisions, when you're making decisions around what do we want to roll out for clients, how do we want to approach clients about use cases that are relevant to them. The data tells a story there, and that's been super inspiring to me, and hopefully can be to other people.
That's awesome. All right, well, we will leave it there. Al, thank you so much for taking the time. I know how busy and crazy and hectic and how full your dance card is at ILTA, so I really appreciate you taking a few minutes with us here.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
All right, appreciate it.